If Ferrari truly believes that silencing a legend like Lewis Hamilton will pave the way for Charles Leclerc's reign, they are not just rewriting strategy, they are rewriting history. But history has a habit of biting back, and Hamilton is far from done. The tension inside the Ferrari garage has reached an almost unbearable level after what many describe as a symbolic moment in the team's evolving dynamic. While the official press releases remain diplomatic, behind closed doors the atmosphere is growing colder by the hour. After the disappointing result for Lewis Hamilton in Canada, whispers began circulating throughout the paddock and beyond. Whispers that Charles Leclerc was not only indifferent to his teammates' struggle, but downright amused. Sources close to the Italian team have reported an unsettling scene following the conclusion of the weekend, where Leclerc allegedly made a sarcastic remark within earshot of several engineers, joking that at this rate, Hamilton might be better off asking Mercedes for a second chance. The comment, delivered with a smirk according to those present, struck a nerve with many who view it as emblematic of the shifting power balance within Ferrari. This incident is not just a case of poor sportsmanship. It reflects a deeper issue, the apparent favoritism that has quietly defined the team's internal politics since the beginning of the season. Publicly, Ferrari insists that both drivers are treated equally. However, real data tells a different story. During recent testing sessions in Maranello, for example, Leclerc received upgraded components for aerodynamic balance, a package Hamilton reportedly did not have access to until days later and under different track conditions. These disparities are not minor, and they have raised serious concerns among fans and analysts alike, especially after the Canada result, which many now view as the boiling point of a long-simmering imbalance. Following the alleged mockery by Charles Leclerc towards Lewis Hamilton, the media frenzy has only intensified. While Ferrari attempts to control the narrative with vague reassurances and tightly managed interviews, internal leaks continue to pour gasoline on the fire. One specific account from an anonymous mechanic, who has worked closely with both drivers this season, describes the environment as heavily tilted. According to his claims, certain engineers have been quietly instructed to prioritize setup work and simulations for Leclerc's side of the garage, often at the expense of Hamilton's preparation time. Though difficult to verify publicly, these accusations resonate with what many observers have noticed. Hamilton, once a symbol of clinical precision and racecraft, now seems trapped in a car that responds more like a prototype than a race-winning machine. The situation is made more complex by Hamilton's status within the team. Despite joining Ferrari with a promise of equal footing, insiders report that some in the Italian hierarchy remain loyal to Leclerc, who has been with the team since 2019. The Monaco-born driver is reportedly closer to key decision-makers within the Gestione Sportiva, including influential figures in the aerodynamic and powertrain departments. This web of internal alliances appears to be affecting development direction, where Leclerc's driving style dictates the setup baseline, leaving Hamilton to adapt or struggle. Adding fuel to the speculation is a recent report by La Gazzetta dello Sport, which highlighted a mysterious delay in Hamilton receiving updates to his front suspension configuration, one that had already shown signs of promise on Leclerc's car. Although the team blamed logistics, seasoned F1 engineers have pointed out that updates for such a high-profile driver would normally be expedited, especially under pressure. The fact that this did not happen only strengthens the theory that Hamilton's influence within the team is not what it was expected to be when he signed with the Scuderia. Social media has become a battlefield for fans, with hashtags like #JusticeForHamilton and #FerrariBias trending for several hours after the Canada weekend. Fan forums and comment sections have exploded with comparisons to past internal rivalries, most notably the infamous tension between Fernando Alonso and Felipe Massa. But this time, the stakes feel different. Hamilton is not just any driver. He is one of the most successful in history, and his legacy being questioned or undermined, even subtly, by his own team could have irreversible consequences for Ferrari's image. As the fallout from Charles Leclerc's smug reaction to Lewis Hamilton's disappointing result in Canada continues to ripple across the Formula One world, attention is beginning to shift toward the long-term implications of this tension, not only for the drivers, but for Ferrari's internal structure. According to a recent analysis published by Automotor UND Sport, this is not merely a case of one driver outperforming another. Instead, it paints a portrait of a team that may be strategically, even culturally, predisposed to protect one side of the garage more than the other. The article points out a series of subtle but revealing decisions taken by Ferrari over the last few weeks. Delays in telemetry access for Hamilton, marginally different testing priorities in simulator sessions, and questionable choices during pre-weekend technical briefings. What makes this situation more volatile is that Hamilton himself is no stranger to intra-team political warfare. His previous years at Mercedes showed that while he thrives in a competitive environment, he also expects a clear and transparent playing field. Sources close to Hamilton now suggest that he has already begun expressing concern not just to his own engineering group, but directly to senior figures in Maranello. These concerns, however, appear to have fallen on deaf ears, raising questions about whether Ferrari is truly committed to treating both of their star drivers with equal respect and resources. One of the most telling moments in this unfolding saga came during a private media dinner in Montreal, attended by several high-ranking members of the paddock press. There, a well-known technical director, who requested anonymity, stated plainly that Luis was never going to be the number one. They brought him for prestige, for the headlines. But the heart of the team still beats for Charles. This comment, although off the record, has since been echoed by multiple individuals in the sport, suggesting a consensus is forming. Hamilton may be facing a silent yet powerful resistance from within. Meanwhile, Leclerc, far from playing the role of a humble teammate, seems increasingly emboldened. His laughter and dismissive tone following the Canada qualifying session were not isolated gestures. Reports have emerged of Leclerc making sarcastic remarks over the team upgrade, which significantly improved aerodynamic stability at low speeds, was tested for longer on Leclerc's simulator setup in Fiorano, giving him a clear edge in anticipating track behavior. By contrast, Hamilton was reportedly limited to only one run due to data calibration issues, an explanation that several former engineers called conveniently vague. The internal tension has reportedly reached a point where even Ferrari's long-standing team members are beginning to split into informal factions. A small but growing group within the engineering core is quietly advocating for equal access to telemetry, simulator time, and development input for both drivers. They argue that Hamilton's expertise, particularly in setup feedback and race strategy, is being wasted and even undermined. One insider, speaking to Autosport Italia, described the environment as strategically suicidal, claiming, "We have the world's most experienced driver, and we're benching his brain." While Leclerc has maintained a relatively playful stance in public, laughing off the idea of a team divide as just paddock gossip, his behavior behind closed doors tells another story. According to a source within Ferrari's communications team, Leclerc has repeatedly requested to keep his engineering debriefs private and has asked the team not to share certain data with Hamilton's side of the garage. Officially, this is being justified as driver preference, but critics argue that such opacity is rare and unhealthy in a team aiming to fight for championships. To make matters worse, there is growing concern among sponsors. Lewis Hamilton brought with him massive commercial value, backed by partnerships with global brands and a massive fan base that expected more than podium scraps. With the team's internal chaos now seeping into public view, several corporate stakeholders are reportedly pressuring Ferrari to take swift action to ensure fairness and restore balance. A leaked internal email from a European brand closely associated with Hamilton described the current atmosphere as a reputational risk. Beyond the numbers, the upgrades, and the strategy calls, there is now a very human element emerging. Lewis Hamilton, the man who dominated a generation, is facing what may be the most mentally draining season of his career, not because of what happens on the track, but because of what happens in the shadows of the red garage. And perhaps most troubling of all is the silence from team principal Fred Vasseur, who so far has refused to address the clear tension, choosing instead to repeat vague assurances about team unity. The fallout from this unspoken but intensifying conflict between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc is beginning to penetrate layers of the sport that go far beyond the garage and paddock. It is evolving into something more cultural, more symbolic, representative of a greater debate about merit, legacy, and the machinery of modern Formula Uno politics. What started as whispers of preferential upgrades has grown into an intricate web of psychological warfare, strategic media manipulation, and increasingly public displays of internal imbalance. And for many, the real question is no longer about whether Hamilton is being treated fairly, but why this pattern seems to repeat itself wherever greatness challenges structure. Sources with access to the telemetry team within Ferrari have started leaking data that suggests subtle discrepancies between the performance simulations projected to Hamilton and the real-world figures achieved on track. These deviations, often in the realm of a few tenths per sector, might appear minor to the casual observer. But at the elite level of motorsport, such details are seismic. Even more troubling is the revelation that Leclerc's simulator sessions have been allocated almost double the time during key development phases, a decision that a former engineer described to Auto Hebdo as a clear sign of institutional prioritization masked as operational necessity. The situation is made more volatile by the fact that Hamilton is not merely a driver. He is a brand, a voice, and for millions, a symbol. His supporters, who span from celebrity fans in the United States to grassroots racing communities in the Caribbean and the United Kingdom, are now mobilizing online with a level of fervor rarely seen in the sport. Hashtags such as #LetLuisCompete, #EqualFerrari, and #JusticeForHamilton have trended across multiple countries, especially after a widely circulated video showed Hamilton walking away from a post-session debrief without saying a word, his face locked in an expression of unspoken frustration. That clip, picked up by BBC Sport, was interpreted by many as the visual embodiment of a man pushed to the edge by forces beyond his control. What adds a layer of painful irony to this situation is the very narrative that brought Hamilton to Ferrari in the first place, a supposed new chapter defined by equality, innovation, and redemption. Back in early 2024, when the signing was first announced, Fred Vasseur made a highly publicized declaration that Ferrari was entering a new era, where every driver would be given the same tools to compete, and where the team would no longer operate under the shadow of internal favoritism that had plagued them in past decades. Now, barely a year and a half into that promise, the very same dynamics seem to be re-emerging, only with new characters and slightly more modern techniques. According to reports from Italian media outlet La Repubblica, a significant portion of the Ferrari engineering core is split along internal lines. Those who believe in the long-term investment that Leclerc represents, and those who feel alienated by a project that was marketed as balanced but in practice is increasingly skewed. One engineer was quoted anonymously stating, "There is a culture here where questioning anything related to Charles is viewed as betrayal. That is not how a world-class team operates. That is how dynasties collapse." This internal tension is bleeding into performance operations, with data inconsistencies and communication breakdowns now being attributed to strained team dynamics. One particularly controversial incident involved a mid-week technical briefing where a critical setup correction was allegedly relayed to Leclerc first, giving him a head start on optimizing the new balance before Hamilton even received the update. When questioned about the delay, a senior member of the technical team claimed it was a logistics issue. But a technician present at the meeting later revealed that the documentation had been prepared with Leclerc's initials embedded in the file name, an indication that the change may have been premeditated. And yet, through all this, Hamilton has chosen a posture of restraint, at least for now. His public remarks remain professional, if notably clipped. "The team is working hard. We have to keep pushing," he said in a recent press conference in Montreal. But body language experts and former drivers alike have noted that his tone has changed. What was once upbeat is now measured. What was once confidence has become calculation. In private, however, insiders claim that Hamilton has begun floating the idea of initiating a full strategic review of his position within Ferrari, even entertaining the idea of leveraging his contract to demand guarantees regarding technical equality. The fear within the team is that, if pushed too far, Hamilton could do something unprecedented, publicly confront the team, or worse, walk away. And while such a move might appear drastic, it would not be the first time Hamilton has used timing, media presence, and cultural relevance to shift the balance of power. After all, this is a driver who turned his name into a global movement, who rewrote the norms of athlete activism in motorsport, and who has always understood that the biggest victories are sometimes won off the track. As the dynamic between Leclerc and Hamilton continues to spiral, and as trust erodes in the quiet corners of Maranello, one truth is becoming clear. This is not just a rivalry, it is a referendum on fairness, identity, and the future of the Scuderia. The deeper one dives into the current state of affairs within Ferrari, the more it becomes evident that what is happening between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc is not merely the result of personal competition, but the byproduct of years of institutional inertia, cultural favoritism, and political engineering masked as team development. And while the surface may still reflect the image of two elite drivers representing one of the most iconic teams in history, behind the curtain lies a landscape fractured by quiet resentment, unspoken policies, and selective empowerment. Recent disclosures from a former logistics coordinator who left Ferrari in late May 2025 revealed something even more alarming than unequal updates or miscommunication: a growing practice within certain departments of using indirect strategies to diminish Hamilton's confidence and performance, without ever formally breaching internal regulations. According to this source, the manipulation often occurred through delay tactics in component delivery, ambiguous telemetry briefings, and reduced simulation priority during critical prep cycles. These micro-disruptions, while seemingly insignificant in isolation, were described as death by 1,000 cuts, aimed at slowly breaking down the rhythm and momentum of the British driver. Further amplifying concerns, a confidential document leaked by an anonymous source inside Ferrari's operations division outlined how a batch of upgraded aerodynamic components, originally set to be evaluated by both drivers simultaneously, was ultimately assigned to Leclerc under the pretext of track adaptation studies. When this came to Hamilton's attention, he reportedly challenged the rationale behind the decision during a closed-door technical briefing. Eyewitnesses claimed his tone was calm but surgical, demanding transparency, only to be met with vague responses and shifting justifications. The moment was described as one where Hamilton's authority was quietly contested, not with open disagreement, but with administrative coldness. What is particularly striking is how this quiet marginalization is unfolding in parallel with a meticulously curated public narrative. On social media, the Ferrari brand continues to push imagery of unity, collaboration, and heritage, posting behind-the-scenes clips of Leclerc joking with engineers, or both drivers shaking hands during media appearances. But insiders are now confirming what many suspected: these are staged moments, often recorded after rehearsals or coordinated scripts, not spontaneous interactions. In truth, it has been weeks since Hamilton and Leclerc shared any unplanned exchange of words beyond compulsory media duties. The atmosphere is frosty, even when cameras are not rolling. Adding fuel to this controlled environment are the sponsors. Key partners of Ferrari, such as Ray-Ban, Shell, and Richard Mille, have begun focusing more of their marketing budget on content centered around Leclerc, citing higher engagement rates in European markets. While this may be explained by analytics, many close to the situation feel this commercial pivot further reflects a hierarchy that increasingly positions Leclerc not just as the team's hope, but its singular priority. This shift has not gone unnoticed by Hamilton's management, who are reportedly exploring alternate marketing alignments for the 2026 season, suggesting that his long-term vision might be moving away from the red of Ferrari altogether. Meanwhile, fans continue to dissect every frame, every tone, and every headline. Videos from recent public appearances where Leclerc appears to smirk as Hamilton answers uncomfortable press questions have gone viral, with some interpreting it as a subtle taunt, others defending it as a media fabrication. But what is undeniable is that Leclerc's rising confidence seems to come not just from results, but from institutional reinforcement. Something that Hamilton, even with all his world championships and decades of excellence, is not receiving in equal measure. And then there is the matter of morale. Several engineers previously assigned to Hamilton's side of the garage have reportedly requested transfers or taken early retirement, citing internal fatigue and misaligned expectations. One technician anonymously stated to Motorsport Italia, "When your job becomes justifying choices you do not believe in, you either stay quiet or walk away." Many of us chose the second. Such internal brain drain is rarely discussed publicly, but it leaves a lasting impact on car development, data continuity, and driver confidence. As things stand, Hamilton is not just facing a teammate. He is facing an ecosystem that appears to favor the narrative of youth, legacy, and European branding. In any other context, this might simply be a generational transition. But in this case, it is playing out as a slow erosion of parity, happening under the guise of strategy. And still, Lewis Hamilton endures. Calm, composed, yet fully aware. His decision to remain silent on many of these matters publicly has not gone unnoticed by fans or pundits. It is the silence of someone who knows the moment to speak will come, and that when it does, it could shift the entire axis of Formula Uno. The tension within Ferrari has now escalated into a slow-burning crisis. While the surface is polished with marketing gloss and public relations management, the fractures beneath are widening, and they all seem to trace back to a singular issue: trust. Lewis Hamilton, one of the most accomplished drivers in the history of Formula Uno, has found himself isolated in a structure that once welcomed him with open arms. What began as a historic partnership between legend and legacy has now become a cold, corporate calculation, where numbers, optics, and market alignment appear to outweigh respect, fairness, and merit. Sources close to the team have hinted that Hamilton is no longer attending certain internal briefings unless personally requested. Others suggest that his direct line of communication with upper management has narrowed, with decisions increasingly routed through intermediaries or logistical personnel. One senior strategist, speaking under condition of anonymity, confessed that, "Every time we try to propose something to improve Louis' setup, there is pushback. Not directly, not aggressively, but in that quiet bureaucratic way that tells you the decision was already made somewhere else." This phenomenon is being described internally as soft sabotage. It is not the dramatic tampering of components or the blatant ignoring of data. It is the subtle manipulation of priorities, the reassignment of resources, and the psychological isolation of a champion. What makes it more complex is that Hamilton cannot publicly prove any of it, because every move on its own seems justified. But together, they form a mosaic of marginalization. Meanwhile, Charles Leclerc continues to present the image of a driver in perfect alignment with the team. Smiling, composed, and often the center of attention in behind-the-scenes content, his presence has become a symbol of the future Ferrari wishes to project. Some argue that Leclerc is simply doing his job and maximizing his opportunities, but others suggest he is doing so with full knowledge of the internal disparity, and perhaps even comfort in it. The smirks, the offhand comments, the silent nods of approval from senior staff, none of it is accidental, according to insiders. What has many observers alarmed is the silence of Formula Uno's governing body and the lack of public discourse among former drivers. Figures like Rosberg, Button, and Vettel, once vocal about fairness and parity, have not addressed the mounting signs of internal imbalance at Ferrari. Some believe they are staying quiet to preserve relationships, while others feel they are simply waiting for something bigger to break before weighing in. But for the fans, silence feels like complicity. The public wants answers. They want clarity. They want to know why one of the greatest to ever drive is being treated like a second thought. As of today, Lewis Hamilton has yet to make any direct accusation. He has not denounced the team, nor called out individuals. But those closest to him know that something is coming. Whether it is an exclusive interview, a strategic exit, or a bombshell revelation, the feeling is that Hamilton is preparing his next move, not emotionally, but surgically. As someone who has always played the long game, he understands the power of timing. And if Ferrari continues down this path, they may soon discover what happens when they back a legacy into a corner. This is no longer just a story of performance. It is a story about power, dignity, and identity. And as the world watches Lewis Hamilton walk this increasingly narrow path, one truth becomes painfully clear. History will not forget how this chapter was written.